Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink with the card that I promised when I posted my last card with the rainbow mermaid tails and all the shimmer and fun stuff. While I was making it, I mentioned in the voiceover that I got the idea for this card, so I made this card as well. This goes back to my black, gold, white favorites. I literally have a playlist, which I probably have to edit, on YouTube with a bunch of cards I've done over the years, because there's just something about that black, gold, white combo. I just love it. So for this card, I have some Simon Says Stamp white cardstock here in my MISTI. I took the black foam pad out of my MISTI so I could stamp this cling background stamp. This is the Out to Sea background stamp, and I stamped this in black on this white background. And I love the detail of it. This is what really had my brain going with this combo. I was like, I bet this would look really good. So I did that and I set it aside because it needs to dry with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And same with the VersaFine Onyx Black. I honestly believe they're the same formula. It's the same manufacturer and everything. But those inks they're like an oil-based pigment ink. And on smooth white cardstock especially, but on most cardstock, they can take a long time to dry. Honestly, I probably should have used my Wow Matte Dull embossing powder on it, but yeah. Heat setting it helps big time, or you gotta let it sit for a good long time to dry, or heat embossing it. So anyway, I stamped that, I set it aside. I used the mermaid tails from the Be a Mermaid set, stamped these onto black cardstock, and then heat embossed them with gold embossing powder. I could have left them just like this, and I nearly did. Because there's just the detail of them and they just look pretty, but I wanted to play. So I pulled out the Gansai Tambi Starry Colors watercolor set. And I'm just using my little Waffle Flower, my mini water media mat. I bought this months ago and haven't filmed a haul video in forever. So I've been using it. So anyway, I had already put water in that palette. The colors aren't like that, they're just solid cakes of watercolors. And with these, like any shimmery or metallic type watercolor, you need to add some water. You need to let it either sit for a while or really work it up with your brush. It's just the nature of them. So I had added water off camera, let them sit for a bit, and then I mixed it up with my brush, and then I just applied it to the palette. That makes it easier because especially with the Gansai Tambi ones, the longer the water sits, it starts to thicken as it dissolves more and more. And it's one of those ones, once you play with it, you'll understand what I mean. But moving it onto the amount of color you want to use onto a separate little palette just makes things a little bit easier. They do settle even on the palette. The shimmer and everything settles to kind of the bottom of the mat, and then it's just kind of liquid on the top. So you still need to swirl it up. And like I said, this was just black cardstock. You can get black watercolor paper. I know it's the Stonehenge brand, I think. One of my subscribers actually sent me a few pieces to try out. I haven't used it yet. I've been hoarding that like I hoard everything else, but with things like this, I don't feel the need for black watercolor paper because I'm not doing a ton of layering. I'm just adding color and I've never had a problem. Obviously, if you're going to do a lot of watercoloring or you want to layer and move things around and all that sort of stuff, yes, you want watercolor paper because cardstock will pill and it'll just become just a mess. But painting it on like this, it doesn't do anything. It's fine. I did experiment with the one and added it's the Midas Touch. Yeah, Aqua Shimmer pen. I didn't like that result. It just blended all the different colors of the gold watercolors together and it didn't add the sparkle I was wanting. So I scrapped that one, which was fine because I had an extra anyway. I only wanted 3 for this entire card. And again, on camera right now, just looking at those mermaid tails on camera right now, they look horrible. They just, it's a funny sort of thing, but this stuff looks completely different in real life versus on camera, and especially when the light hits it. So I die cut them with the coordinating dies. And then my background I trimmed down so it was the same width as my card. So it's 3.5 inches wide. And then I'm going to trim off the top here because I don't want that straight line from the background stamp. So I'm just going to use my little detail cutter bee scissors and trim this right down. I originally was going to stamp just the background right onto my card base, but that would have required more effort because I'd have that straight line. And then also I want to be able to tuck the mermaid tails into it. So doing a separate piece just makes everything easier. Speaking of the card base, more heavyweight white cardstock. This is the piece I'd cut in the beginning. I just used the leftover piece for my stamping, and then this main piece that was 7 inches by 8.5. I am scoring at 3.5 to make my slimline cards, 3.5 by 8.5 inches. And then I folded the card inside out, and I'm putting it back into my MISTI here. And I'm going to stamp this background with Delicata Golden Glitz ink. Something else I haven't used in a while, but it's still a favorite. So my original plan was I was going to stamp the stamp and then just add a strip of cardstock along the top to kind of hide that straight line. But then after I inked it up, I was like, why not? Why not try to just kind of wipe off those little waves at the very top? So that's what I did. Just wiped them off. Why not? So it didn't need to be completely perfect because, again, this is the inside of the card. I actually did a pretty decent job. I just missed right along the, what'll be like the left side of the stamping. But I'm going to fix that in a second. So stamp that onto the inside of the card. And same thing. It's like, oh, I liked that in black for the front and then this gold. And I'm like, oh. I could play with his background stamp. This is not one I thought I would just fall in love with. And now it's like, I just want to keep playing with it. So to fix my little oops, this is where I will creatively place one of these mermaid tails. I was going to add one to the inside anyway, but this helped to fix the mistake. Like I've said in other videos, when you've got, you know, a smear or splatter where it didn't mean to go, or just something you need to fix, glue something on top of it and you're good to go. So to make this not look weird, I traced with a pencil one of the little waves onto the tail there and trimmed it with scissors. So it looks like it's peeking out without me actually doing any cutting or, you know, into the actual card base, because I didn't want to do that. Because then you'd see the back of the card and there'd be like this weird cut with a piece of black cardstock sticking out of it, if you know what I mean. So that alleviated that problem. For this piece, I'm going to do what I did on my last video, and I'm just going to use a craft knife and do just a little bit of very simple cutting. This is about as, you know, intense as I want to get with a craft knife. I've done a few things over the years, like doing some really a little bit more intricate fussy cutting and all that kind of stuff, but nowadays I can't be bothered. But this is simple. You're just kind of following along a simple curve. So I cut those little slits into the background so that I'll be able to tuck those mermaid tails into it. And then I wanted to add splatter, but I didn't want to add the splatter with the tails in place, but I didn't want to adhere the background to the card until the tails were in place. So to get around that, I first used a tiny bit of painter's tape to kind of hold the card closed, and then used a second piece of painter's tape rolled up to hold the background onto the card so that I can add my splatter. And I'm going to add a lot. I'm using black soot distress paint. This stuff is like liquid. If you want a good black splatter, this is the way to go. People have asked me that before, what's a good product? Because a lot of normal craft paints, they're very thick, obviously. And when you want to thin them down to do a decent splatter with, you'll thin down the consistency and it won't be as black. This stuff is like liquid. You do not need to add any water to it. It is, and it is permanent, FYI. Like, clean off whatever you're working on, your brushes, all that stuff, because it's permanent. Like, it will, that's what it's meant to be. It's permanent. It won't come off. So Tim Holtz has shown using that on like his stencils and that. He'll like rub black soot paint into them to show like the etch lines and that sort of thing. It's literally that permanent. So anyway, splattered the background with that, then splattered, that's why I had so much gold of the Starry colors on my little palette there. I splattered all that, let this dry completely, made sure it was dry. This part was a little nerve-wracking, stamping the sentiment onto the card base, but my backup plan was if I smeared it or messed it up or stamped it crooked, I was just going to heat emboss it on black cardstock and adhere it on top. But I managed to stamp it. I was kind of surprised. So I stamped a sentiment from the Be a Mermaid set and then very carefully pulled the card back open. That painter's tape is strong. It will tear cardstock if you're not careful. So I was very careful kind of prying the card back open so I could remove that tape. And then on the inside of the card, I'm going to stamp another sentiment from the Be a Mermaid set with that same VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. Again, with the idea that if I mess it up, I'll just stamp it on a separate piece and adhere it on top. So, lucked out, surprisingly, with those sentiments. So I didn't have to do any like fixes or anything. And then for these tails, I decided to put a couple of thin 3D foam squares behind just the very tips of the tails, like the fins, I guess, of the tails. So added that and then some craft tacky glue and then tucked them into place there on this background. And then once those are in place, I can adhere this to my card base. And as always, you could leave it here, but I'm not gonna, because I gotta add even more bling, and also because this is a black and gold and white card and I have lots of black and gold and white bling. So adhered this into place, and then I pulled out a bunch of Studio Claudia bling again. I'm going to use the onyx crystals and the golden crystals and the gold sparkle crystals, which are clear with gold glitter in them, which are favorites. I just love, 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 love. So I added a ton of these to my cards, and I've said this again. That's what I'm also loving about Slimline cards, is there's just more, there's more room for activities. There's more room for embellishments. So anyway, added a ton of these. Also FYI, off camera, I did gold heat emboss those tails onto a black Slimline envelope. I don't have a link to this envelope yet. It's coming soon. I now have none left because I've used up the ones I have, but they're coming soon and I'm going to order a ton of them. I'm so happy. So I gold heat embossed the tails onto an envelope, added a bit of that gold splatter, and it just finished off this card and I'm so happy. So anywho, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will have a link below to the supplies used, etc., my blog post, all that stuff. So you can check that out below if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!